Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome into a new edition of Batter Up here on Sports Insanity Network, sponsored by the Dugout of Millwood. We got the whole group back together. Mike,
I'm
Dan, the old ops guy. Gentlemen, how we doing?
Well, it's good to be back. It's nice to be here, be able to talk a little bit more sports from a
Got the whole
nice
group back together.
central locale.
Uh, Dan, how we doing, my friend?
Uh, I am 2 days away from flying to an island, to a getaway nice resort that I call my grandma's house. So I can't wait for it.
A resort that I call Grandma's house.
You know,
It's pretty good.
cool.
Uh,
Nope, I'll be flying out soon. So you won't see me on any of these network platforms for a little while. So just want to give you a little bit of a heads up as to what's going to look like. But I agreed to come on today because I needed a batter up before before I head on my
Before
way,
you leave.
soak in the sun and eat some nice Spanish food.
Mm. All right. Yeah. So we're gonna send Dan out with a bang. Uh, let's dive right in. We got a lot to cover. Let's start with the new rule change that is being discussed with Major League Baseball.
How
Uh,
dumb is this? Jesus Christ.
uh, Major League Baseball is discussing a mandated rule that would make starting pitchers go a minimum of 6 innings in every start. Primary goal is to make starting pitchers relevant again. We'll get into some of the other stuff that goes on, but Dan, I'll start with you. Your reaction to this potential rule coming in.
Uh, Look, I want to start off by saying this. I appreciate the commissioner for wanting to bring back the old traditions of the game where the starting pitcher actually mattered throughout the season and not just in big games or in the playoffs and stuff. I appreciate that he wants to bring back, the starting pitcher and what it means to the team. Like he's trying to really bring back the value of it. I really do appreciate that. But it's not realistic anymore. It is not realistic. You're gonna have you're gonna have pitchers that are gonna get bad starts. And before you know it, those bad starts, which can be saved, instead of it being 8 runs, it'll be 22 runs. Which one would you rather? Would you rather a 22-run start or would you rather an 8 run start? After 8 runs and 2 innings and you're doing terribly, you get pulled. Instead of, well, after 6 innings, you give up a trillion runs and you're done. You've reached your limit. Now, I know there are some exceptions to the rule that they are also proposing, but
Yes.
still, like you're forcing the pitcher to, stretch. And look, it may require some type of training and some type of mental discipline, which can happen. I'm not saying that this can't work, but it's a tall order to ask. Just allow the teams to operate how they want to operate. I don't agree with the bullpen games either, because that's part of the reason is because of
Yep.
these stupid ass bullpen games where they're just the dumbest thing in the world. I don't agree with it either, but let the teams do whatever the hell they want. That's all I'm gonna say. Let managers, let the teams operate how they want to operate, and then we'll see who the real team wins in the World Series. That let's leave it up to that.
Mark, before you go, I just want to point out, Dan, you pointed out exceptions. Here are those exceptions. That would be the starter throws 100 pitches before the sixth inning. The starter gives up 4 or more earned runs, or he gets injured. Now, with the injury, there becomes a designation where he would have to spend a stint on the injured list. That would be mandated or required here in this article from ESPN.
That's another thing. Like, what? Like, okay, what if he just hurts his wrist? And he just misses a start. Like, can we have like that flexibility too, where it's not about spending time on the injured list? Because that's at least a 10-day stint. You don't want to do that. What if the starting pitcher's fine?
Yeah, that they're gonna have to figure this stuff out. Mark?
Growing up before these guys, starting pitching was everything. In the 80s, that was the thing. Everything from Doc Gooden, Noah Ryan, even though Ryan was like 40 years old at that point, didn't matter. Over the years, we've seen that transition kind of changing. The starter pitcher has lost some of their fizzle, and it hasn't been an overnight thing. It's been since the spider tack has been removed and the pitch clock has been instituted. I think a lot of people agree that the pitch clock is partial to blame for as many of these injuries. And as Mike and I spoke well before we started that, we also agreed that not allowing them to have that spider tack also, required more grip on the ball, putting more flex on the ball, which put more pressure on joints, meaning the elbow and the shoulder, coming right from our brilliant head of the writing network part of the. So the thing about the IL, no. You're going to tell me you're going to prove an injury to a non-injury. Come on. There has to be some type of caveat. Maybe he has to miss a game. Now, that could mean the next game and during, if it's a starting pitcher, fine. If it's a bullpen pitcher, fine. Can't be a 10-day stint, then it's a 2-day start. It's a 2-start for a starting pitcher.
Well, that kind of goes into the suspensions for the sticky stuff. It's 10 games for a starter who gets caught. That's 2 starts. For a reliever, that's literally 10 games. I think the other thing that, and this is where I don't hate the mandate, because I think 6 innings, that's what starting pitchers, like you said, you were used to taught to go deep into games. We've lost that because teams like to baby their young pitchers. They've put a real emphasis on bullpens. And in this article from ESPN, they talk about, maybe it'll help offenses too, because no starting pitcher goes a third time through the order. There's also, this article from Jesse Rogers, Major League Baseball believes that pitchers would have to stop relying heavily on max velocity and would set up their training around navigating longer starts by having more control. Well, the problem with this is, I think today pitchers rely on max velocity, but we've also seen guys who could pitch at max velocity, but also be able to pitch. The guy I think of automatically, and this won't hurt him because used to go 6 innings anyway, but Justin Verlander early in his career was 98, 100 miles per hour with that fastball, that nasty 12-6 curveball, and then he had a slider. But Verlander, as he got older, realized, hey, I don't have to go 98 every time. I could throw 94, 95, and in my back pocket, if I need it, there's 98 miles an hour or 100 miles per hour. And I think that's something some of these younger pitchers are going to have to learn. Now, we can talk about guys who throw hard. We can talk about guys who can't locate. I mean, Margaret, we saw this as Met fans. Matt Harvey, I think, is a good example. He
Yeah.
threw hard. He could pitch. Injury still occurred. So, someone within the division, Dan, close to you, Steven Strasburg, threw hard, knew how to pitch, but the injuries still occurred.
Yeah, but with Strasburg, age was also a factor too, because he got injured early on in his career.
Right.
So it was going to be debilitating, whether he turned 40 or he turned 30. I mean that's just the bottom line. I agree with you that the pitchers emphasize too much on the speed of the pitching. And but I don't think, that's the biggest problem. The biggest problem to me is that the starters aren't as good as it used to be. We don't have like stuff on every team. And not every team had an ace, but you had pitchers that tried their best to give a good start and go as long as they can, and if they couldn't, they couldn't. These pitchers today aren't even trying because they know that they're there as like sort of sabermetrics pawns. You know what I mean? So
Now that was a great comment right there, by the way. I just want to say.
well, it's the truth though. It's the truth. The money ball system has truly changed baseball. When Billy Beane instituted that type of system, when the Red Sox and Theo Epstein instituted that type of system, it changed baseball. Especially now that we know that they can win with
it. And the rules for pitching have changed so much over the years, because you're right, Dan. As soon as a guy hits or gets near 100 pitches, you're looking into the bullpen like, all right, they're cranking someone up. Or third time through the order, there's no way they're letting this starter go a third time through the order. A guy like Nolan Ryan would laugh at that because Nolan Ryan would do it. Hell, Roger Clemens, if we want to go more recently, they'd laugh at this stuff. And I think these organizations need to figure out, first of all, this is going to take some time for these organizations. But at the end of the day, I think at some point, too, Major League Baseball has to do something for the pitcher. Everything they've done recently has been kind of against the pitcher. This innings limit stuff, or this innings mandate, whatever you want to call it, that is for offenses and their benefit. The lack of the sticky substance, that is for offense and Major League Baseball's benefit. The pitch clock, more of a benefit to hitters because pitchers don't have that time to rub up the ball and walk around if they get frustrated. Nope, I've got 15 seconds. I got to pump another one in there.
So would you think, Mike, that if this was close to be implemented, they add 10 seconds to the clock? So instead of 20, now
It's
you're getting
30.
at a little bit of, you get 30 seconds. So you're kind of like you're saying, you say, what are we doing for the pitcher? Give that pitcher 10 extra seconds to get his thoughts together. So yes, what are we saying? We're saying that games would be extended by 15 minutes extra now,
so
instead of the 20 minutes that they're short.
Yeah.
If I was a pitcher, I don't care about the clock. I want something to help me grip the ball, because now I'm mandated to throw minimum 100 pitches, and 6 innings I'm looking at probably 3 times through an order. I need something that could help me. That way I'm not putting as much pressure on my elbow or my shoulder, which, by the way, are my money makers.
You mean to tell me that there's no sticky substance that's legal? Like, come on now.
Well, right. I need baseball and
They
all of
even have
its
a problem with
infinite
rosin
wisdom
because
to
it sticks.
find out what it is.
Even have a problem with rosin because it sticks. It's
Yeah.
not legal. It's not illegal, but it's still,
Rosin plus sweat apparently is illegal.
come on, like something, you know. Um, we sound like a bunch of purists right now because I know that the new people of baseball, the people that are trying to ruin the game, they want more home runs, they want more runs, they want more stolen bases, they want everything, they want more of everything. I want more home runs as well. I want more scoring. I'm tired of the 1 run game, 2 run games too. But I also want good pitching. Some of these games they go drunk. You should have seen the Red Sox Orioles game the other night,
Yeah,
where it
12
was like
10.
12, 12
What
to
a game.
10.
What a game.
12 to 10. Look, one of those games once in a while, okay, that's cool. But like you see a bunch of those games nowadays. Like you see a bunch of high scoring games, something that I've never seen in baseball before.
And that's what the implement changes, whether using the shift, etc., and not. And actually, certain teams say, hey, look, we need to get a proper designated hitter who can actually run the bases. I
Yeah.
mean, that's the whole key.
Yeah. I don't think the Players Association would fight hard on this, but I think there has to be a compromise between the Players Association and Major League Baseball and how we're going to get this done. So keep an eye out. If you're interested, look into it. There's a great article on ESPN by Jesse Rogers. Go read it. Talks about what could be coming down the line, and he's got some executives who talk about the process it's going to take in how they value starting pitching when it comes to the draft and such, and how they develop these arms once they're drafted into systems. So, yeah, go read it. It's a good article. All right, next on the agenda. Milwaukee Brewer outfielder Christian Yelich has decided he's going to undergo back surgery and miss the rest of the season. For the Milwaukee Brewers, who have the biggest lead of any division leader in Major League Baseball, they will be without Christian Yelich for the rest of the year. So, Mark, how big of a blow is this to the Brewers?
I mean, to include pretty much the three of us, we all said that the person who's going to be primed for a big year was Christian Yelich, and he was off not only just during the first half, I mean, just before he went down, he was doing amazing. You don't just replace a Christian Yelich. Christian Yelich, came up through Miami and then has spent pretty much the best of his career with the Milwaukee Brewers. He has been in such a decline. It was nice to see him on a major incline this year. But as speaking for someone who's had 14 back surgeries, yes, medical technology is a lot different than when they carved me up and put titanium in me. And maybe it could be done, but we've seen with other stars such as David Wright, who never really got the back treatment that he could get to get back to playing. Is it time for Christian Yelich to just say, what a career? I mean, got 1,590 hits. He's the face of the organization. Now become an internal part of the organization, become the hitting coach, whatever. Stay with the team. I'm sure they would throw whatever they wanted at.
Dan?
Um, the man. I'm not saying for him to leave the game. I'm not saying for him to retire. If he could get back into shape, he can. back injuries are tough. We've seen back injuries in many sports, and players try to come back from it, and they're not the same. So I don't want to tell Christian Yelich, hey man, back off. But you may need to take a step back a little bit. Maybe instead of playing the outfield, becomes a designated hitter. If just start doing that, because he's too injury prone. It's a liability at this point for Milwaukee. And he really has to start thinking about taking care of his body, dude. That's all it takes. That's really what it takes. At this point, that's all that matters is taking care of your body, and he needs to do that, and soon. I feel bad for Christian Yelich because I know he had a resurgent year. I feel bad for the Brewers because I know they've been wanting to come back, and they got him back only for him to be injured again and losing for the season. They're having a really terrific season, Milwaukee Brewers. So it's a tough blow. I don't know what Christian Yelich is going to look like when he comes back in 25, and it's looking like mid-25 at the minimum.
Yeah, because if he's undergoing the surgery in August, you got to think he'll miss at least the first part
At least
of the season.
I would not until after the All-Star break.
Yeah,
I would say would be his earliest return.
And by the way, if the Brewers aren't in a position of contention, they may just say he's out for 25 and say, listen, we'll wait for you for 26 potentially. But look, I feel bad for Christian Yelich too. I think, well, the guy was having a great year. The Brewers were winning, which was the shock to a lot of people with the amount of injuries and guys who had departed. No one thought the Brewers would be in the position they're in. But this is just a tough blow to a very good team. And again, you got to wonder what comes next for Yelich. And it kind of reminds you of the similar situation in Anaheim with Mike Trout when it comes to the injury. So, Mark, I'll pose this to you. Who do you have more faith in having a bounce back in 2025, Christian Yelich or Mike Trout?
I knew this was coming today, and has gone back and forth on this a few different times. Both players have pretty much assured themselves a spot in Cooperstown eventually one day, probably one well before the other. Mike Trout, this is the most consecutive years with a guy with a torn something that has ended his career. It's time for Mike Trout to make a decision on whether he's gonna continue to play or is he gonna be a DH, just like we were suggesting with Christian Yelich. Both players getting injured around the same time, both same type of length on the same time injury. So you have to expect Mike Trout's not going to be back until about probably close to the All-Star break, if not after it. And it's who goes out there and has no fear of getting hurt again. And you want to know what? You don't know what that's like until you've been really injured and you step back up in that plate and it's all real again. But to answer Mike's question, I think it's going to be more Mike Trout because I think Christian Yelich is unfortunately done.
All right, let me pose a follow-up. Is it Mike Trout for the Angels?
See, now you're talking a whole
I'm just getting
different
out,
ballgame.
going out on a limb.
Why not? It is a whole different ballgame and an interesting question. You got Mike Trout, who's already been saying he wants to honor his contract. He wants to stay with Los Angeles as long as he can. But let's face it, how much longer are the Angels going to dish out that $500 million contract to a guy who's not making it a complete season? I have to believe they're getting injury return money from those contracts each year. And that's something we don't hear about. So Mike Trout isn't necessarily getting what he's getting. He's getting a lot less. But would Mike Trout entertain a trade? The question is, which team would not be crazy to try to top that and make that the first $1 billion DH in baseball? Yeah, forget about him playing in the field. Man, maybe once a season, twice a season, he'll go play in the field with everyone holding their breath. But if Yelich and him decide to come back, they both come back as DHs because neither one of them can play the field anymore after surgeries like these, for Trout being multiples and whatnot. And Mike, to answer your question, if there's a team like New York, which either one would, I hate to say the Yankees or the Mets, because if the Yankees lose Soto to the Mets, then I could see Mike Trout in New York, meaning the Yankees. It's a possibility. It all comes down to that initial chess game of what the Yankees do before the season ends and what they do with Soto.
So I was trying to be tongue in cheek when I said would it be Trout for the Angels. Because listen, I think you got to at least explore it if you're the Angels, the thought process, because you're not really close to winning at the moment. But listen, it's a whole off-season topic that we could go on and on about for a while, but we'll move on here. We got another pitching injury that I think, Mark, you talked about earlier. The Dodgers, another pitching injury. Tyler Glasnow, they called it elbow tendonitis. He lands on the 10-day injured list. And according to Dave Roberts, they don't think this is a long-term thing. They think that once 10 days is up, Glasnow will be back. Listen, if I hear the word elbow or shoulder, I don't care what comes next. I'm nervous.
Well, as we've seen over this season, you hear the word the UCL strain. Well, you all know what that means. That means, okay, and tomorrow we're going to announce that pitcher's getting Tommy John immediately, yada, yada, yada. And I agree with Mike. If it's anything with those two joints, I'm worried. Dan?
Dan, you good?
So the Dodgers, man, just when they think they're going to get back to full strength, they don't. They lose Glasnow. It's been pretty solid for them. Yeah, it's a tough one to swallow on the Dodgers. Not something that I would have expected this late in the season, and that's the problem. It's late in the season now, so wins matter and stuff, and where you're going to be in the playoffs matter. Tough one. I say it's a tough one,
especially with how hot the Diamondbacks and Padres have been.
Exactly,
and they're
yeah,
breathing
exactly.
right down your neck. And the other part of this is there's no at the moment the Dodger rotation is in complete shambles.
Yeah,
we don't know what
they are doing a lot of moving around in that rotation.
Yeah,
It's scary.
Glasnow was the constant. Kershaw, he can only do what he could do now, which is pretty much 4 to 5 innings. Walker Bueller's still working his way back from injury. He was not good the other day. Your best starter outside of Glasnow has been Gavin Stone.
Yeah.
I mean, and this is a Dodger team that has an expectation on them because of the money they've spent to go out and win a World Series. If Tyler
Which is still not out of the question, No.
I'm not saying it is. But I'm saying if they don't win the World Series, it's another failure. And they need everyone healthy. Look, it's the same thing in Philadelphia. If Zach Wheeler goes down or if Bryce Harper goes down and the Phillies don't win, it's going to be viewed as a failure, despite the injuries, because of the money they spent. So this is a huge blow for the Dodgers.
Yeah. Well, and again, you make that trade for Glasnow to boost your rotation, right? For moments down the stretch. And now you're not getting him down the stretch.
They're hoping it's 10 games or 10 days. They better be right, because that's the guy they can't afford to lose, especially now.
Yeah. Like I said, the Dodgers at full strength, Dodgers at partially full strength are good. Dodgers at full strength are better.
Yeah.
And again, tough one to swallow. I mean, I don't know, man. The more I see this Dodger team get hurt and hurt and hurt and hurt, guys missing games for a month, 2 months, 3 months, all that stuff. The more I see it happening, the more I have doubts about how this team can go far. And I don't care how Shohei is playing this season.
Well, I think you bring up a good point, then, because this isn't the first guy to have an arm issue for the Dodgers. Walker Buehler had Tommy John surgery. Dustin May had Tommy John surgery. Tony Gonsolin. Others have had these arm issues. So is this a product of how the Dodgers develop these guys? Is this a product of the lack of the sticky substance and the Dodgers are just caught in bad luck? I don't know, but I think it's a fair question to be asked with the amount of guys who are getting lost by the Dodgers to these injuries. All right. One guy who used to be a Dodger legend, Max Scherzer. He said the other day he plans to pitch next year. Mark, your thoughts there on Scherzer, who's had injury plague 2024?
Let's just go back to injury plague 2023, and when he was with New York. Anytime you hear right capsule and all that, there's trouble. That there's a problem. So he went down to Texas. He was just coming back and he had a shoulder strain, and now it's worse, but he plans on coming back again. I'm sorry. What more does this guy gotta prove in his career? He is a Hall of Famer, not a future. He is a 5-and-in Hall of Famer. One of the best pitchers I've had enjoyment of watching to play, from his start to where he's ended. Would I like to see him pitch 1 or 2 more games? Yeah, it would be nice, but not at the expense of the man's health and more surgeries, because the older you get, the more the surgeries start to hurt, and I hate to see it. So if Max plans to pitch, maybe they go to a 6-man rotation where they're giving him an extra day's rest at the times, or like Mike said, they go to the hated bullpen game to give him that extra day's rest. So, I mean,
what do you got to prove? What do you have left to prove? You've won 2 World Series. You're a shoo-in for the Hall of Fame. Listen, I get it. Probably not the way you want to go out with all the injuries you had this year. But then you should have retired last year after the Rangers won the World Series. And no, I don't just say that because then his money comes off of Steve Cohen's books. That's a whole nother conversation. Max Scherzer, we are nearing a point where 3 of the best pitchers, not just of our generation, but of all time, Clayton Kershaw, Max Scherzer, Justin Verlander, they're all at the end. They're all at the end. And the injuries for all 3 have piled up. And Kershaw, I get it. He wants to win a World Series that's non-COVID. But Scherzer and Verlander both won World Series that weren't COVID.
Right.
They can go out on their own. It doesn't impact their legacy, but you got nothing left to prove. You're one of the greatest pitchers of all time. I don't know. It gets to me because I want to remember you for your greatness, not what happened at the end of your career.
What strikes me is, how these pitchers, knowing that they're not as good as they used to be, knowing that they can't stay healthy as much as they used to, right? These pitchers, they still want to keep going and going and going. At this point, they're probably chasing some sort of record or everything. Like there's a reason for the reason why they want to stay in the game. But they don't realize how much they're really starting to cost these teams.
Mm-hmm.
They're not really thinking of that too. They're doing it for their own selfish reasons. Not saying that Max Scherzer and Justin Verlander, not saying that they're all selfish overall, but there's got to be some sort of self-centered reason for why you still want to play. And age becomes a factor quick in baseball. So strikes me. It's absolutely amazing how these players and players in general that they just never quit whenever we see the light at the end of the tunnel. Quit.
Yeah. All right. Shout out Max Scherzer for trying to pitch 2025. We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
There. But on to the series for the week. For the biggest ones. We start in Atlanta, mainly because the Mets are a game behind the Braves in the wild card standings, and we are anti-Braves for that time. But the Braves host the Phillies this week, Mark. And the Braves, argument's sake, if they can take 2 of 3 here from the Phillies, all of a sudden that huge Philly lead gets cut down to about 6 games.
You just made a good point, and as much as I want it to come true, 2 out of 3 would be nice for Atlanta. And Atlanta, as of late, they've had the injuries have just been insane for them. And now they just lost d'Arnaud for a small or an extended period of time. We'll know more on that when they come out with it. This is like a no-quit team that doesn't care if they don't have their Ronald Acuna. They go out, they play, they win, they lose, they lose. That is how their mentality is in Atlanta. And Atlanta has the fight in them to take it best to the Phillies. There's no Nola or Wheeler right now because they just pitched. If you're gonna go after any type of part of the Phillies, the 3, 4, 5, that's going to be your chance because if you're facing Wheeler and Nola, forget it. That is the sickest 1-2-1.
According to ESPN, Nola and Wheeler are pitch, and they're pitching Wednesday, Thursday.
Oh, I got that wrong, but
So
okay. Then
I
there's well,
just
no,
looked.
well,
I wanted to see.
yeah, no, well. Now, how big would it be for them just to beat Nola and Wheeler? To knock them down a peg. It's going to be a very, very tough series for the two of them. I think, oh God, I hate to say this. I think the Phillies are going to knock Atlanta down, which is great for us,
Yeah.
especially the way we're playing. And if we can get a couple of games ahead of Atlanta, that would be fine as well.
By the way, this is the beginning of a stretch for the Phillies. They play the Braves, they play the Royals next weekend, then they play the Astros, and then they end the month against the Braves again.
That's a tough run.
That is not easy for the Phillies, who have not been great since the All-Star break. All right. Dan, thoughts on Phillies Braves?
Huge series for the Phillies. Look, the Braves are playing with house money because of the players that they have right now. Phillies are better, so it's a big series for the Phillies. I expect them to win, but at the same time, you know, they haven't really been themselves over the past few weeks. So they need to come out strong and cement themselves as the big time division leader.
Yeah, the Phillies are just listen, they weren't going to play as well as they did for the whole season. No one does that. But the offense is getting going again. Trey Turner's been on fire. Schwarber's doing his thing. Eventually, Bryce Harper's going to get going. He's too good, as much as, don't love him. But the Phillies are there. The Braves, the Braves offense is just weird, man. Ozuna's had a great year. And outside of that, Olsen looks like has gotten hot. Riley, we're still kind of waiting for. The Braves are kind of very strange in that regard of we like them, but they haven't got mega hot yet. But we'll wait and see. All right. Dan, the Yankees will host the Guardians this week at the stadium.
That's gonna be a rough one. They've had an okay road trip. Obviously, those two games against the White Sox where they obliterated the White Sox, fine, but they also lost to the White Sox, and so far it's 1-1 against the Tigers in this series. It's astounding how the Yankees can't beat the crummy teams when they should be beating the crummy teams. So then that makes me very worried about this Guardian series. Yeah, I know the Guardians are good and they continue to win. I have no idea how they continue to win. They continue to win. And it frightens me. It does frighten me. This is a series in the month where I specifically pointed out that this was going to be the one to worry about if you're in New York. So, strange, curious, and can the big guns, the Stantons and the Judges and the Sotos, can they come through big? And we also need the starting pitching come through big. I'm sick and tired of watching poor outings by Nestor Cortez and Carlos Rodon. I want good outings out of these pitchers.
That goes back to speaking about the rule change. You want good start. They want them to go to 6 innings. So just by that comment alone, that answers the question we had at the beginning.
I think the other part, Dan, you brought it up. At this point, the only trusted starter is Garrett Cole. And in relation to Garrett Cole, and this is not an insult, I know he's coming off of injury. Garrett Cole hasn't been great against really good offenses. You know, he pitched great against Toronto, and he pitches great against I don't know who he made his last start against, but you're still hoping he finds that consistency. Luis Gill, they keep talking about an innings limit on him, but you're right. Nestor's got to find it. Rodon was not great yesterday, but give the
Awful.
Tigers credit; they worked his pitch count really well. But you know what you're getting out of Judge and Soto. It's everyone else you got to wonder about offensively. So, but Cleveland, let me tell you something about Cleveland, man. They got an MVP candidate of their own in Jose Ramirez. Steven Kwan is the best Kwan since Michelle Kwan, and they find ways, man. They have guys you've never heard of, but they play their butts off, and they're really talented.
In that stadium, look, by the way, hats off to Aaron Judge and on his accomplishment, the fastest to 300 home runs. You know, I know normally I never compliment a Yankee on anything, but I do like Aaron Judge. I've seen many a battle between the Guardians and the Yankees over my times where run counts have been ridiculous from 21-1 to 18 to whatever. This is a stadium that is primed for the Guardians. No offense, the Yankees play in it every day, so it's not primed for them. They're used to it. For power hitters such as Jose Ramirez, Andres, I know it's funny to say Andres Jimenez and they're in power, but he can hit a ball 325 feet, and that clears left field. This is a prime time, and I'm sorry to throw this hatchet. Oh, wow, God, bad pun intended. But I really think the Cleveland Guardians are going to go in and really make it tough on the Yankees. I'm not saying they're going to beat them 2 out of 3 or anything. I just think the games are going to be 1-run to 2-run win games. It's going to be closer than people are thinking. Maybe they grab 1 out of 3, in all fairness.
That's about for best record in the American League right now, because those two in Baltimore right there with each other. Speaking of the Orioles, they go to Citi Field for 3 against the Mets in interleague play. And, yeah. Mark's guys is over.
No, I got my hands over my faces because I was supposed to be there tomorrow, but due to different problems, I'm not going to be. And yes, I was going to watch my beloved Mets, Pete and Francisco and all of them. But I wanted the first-hand chance to see Adley Rutschman, Jackson Holiday, Anthony Santander. I wanted to see this young team play. So I watched it on my TV, all very well and good. You got the Mets, who are arguably one of the most consistent teams of the last 40 or more games. They have risen from the depths of hell out of state and 7-11, and they are right in it. They're right in it, 1 game behind the Braves. Like then Mike says, the Mets are going to face the Phillies again soon. It could come down to be that close if the Mets keep getting positive reinforcement from the band-aided rotation they have put together. But let's face it, Manaea, Severino, Peterson, God, and anybody else they've thrown up there have gone out, Budo, have gone out and have done exceptional. But the lineup we all knew from day one was going to be able to produce runs. And that they have. They've proven all that. The question becomes is, the Mets make the wild card? Nobody had that 4 pick at the beginning of this season.
Dan, you're going to be in the position of a Yankee fan rooting for the Mets. How does that make you feel?
Dan, you took my question. I was going for that next.
Gotta do what you gotta do. You know what I mean? Yankees gotta make the playoffs, right?
Well, they'll make it. It's just whether they win the
No,
division or the wild card.
no, no, no,
Dan's
man.
gonna be holding a stuffed
Look,
Mr. Met the
it,
whole time
it,
and hugging.
look. I don't in the division. I need the Orioles to lose.
Yep.
I need the Orioles to lose.
Well, I understand.
If you look on this Mets season, and Mike and I talk constantly, day in and day out, about the Mets. Have the Mets faced a lineup as dangerous as this one this whole season?
I think the only lineup close to this would be Philly, but you got to remember, I don't know if this happened. I don't know if the Mets faced Philly with Trey Turner in their lineup this year.
I don't believe they did. I believe he
Yeah,
was at
so
that
so
time with the hamstring. So
I mean Gunnar Henderson, you brought up Rutschman and Santander, Ryan Mountcastle, Cedric Mullins. It's you know 8 or 9, but his speed's a factor. This Oriole lineup is really dangerous, and you know they're going to be able to do some sort of damage. But the Mets really have had good enough starting pitching. I think David Peterson will start Monday, and
and
he
you want I
and
like
he
that.
and he's been good, and they always score runs with David Peterson's on the mound. So
But also, one thing about David Peterson is he's already meeting that requirement that would go into effect. He's going an average of six in the third innings for the Mets every
and
time.
he's right around there. Yeah, when that comes
And
into play.
yeah, right. But let me tell you, I feel bad for any Met pitcher that has to go up and face that lineup, but it's a factor of baseball. They had to
Mhm.
do it in 1927 when they faced the murderers row of the Yankees. I mean, there's a good question for when Dan comes back. But Mike, I'm gonna throw this one at you. Murderers row 1927, Yankees now.
Who would I rather pitch to?
Who would you rather have?
Ooh,
And then I'm gonna throw it to Dan.
In terms of what?
Let Mike answer, and then you'll. It's a question.
You know what? I think I'm going to go Murderers Row.
Okay, Dan, as a loyal Yankees fan, which would you rather have? Murderers Row of 1927 New York Yankees, or the New York Yankees lineup of right now?
Murderers Row.
Okay. It was just an offshoot of a question because I was going to lead right into this. Is the Yankees lineup necessarily a murderer's row, or is it Baltimore?
The
Which is
Yankee lineup is really solid, but it has two foundational pieces. Everything comes off of that. I think in Baltimore, you got a bunch of guys who could do everything. The Yankee lineup is so much more predicated on what Judge and Soto do. Baltimore, if Gunnar Henderson goes 0 for 4, they could still win a ball game because of Adley Rutschman and those guys. If Soto or Judge goes 0 for 4, I don't like the Yankees' chances. Am I wrong, Dan?
that's the problem.
Yeah.
No, of course not. Because you know, right now it's really those two. I mean, both be picking it up, which is nice.
And Austin
But
Wells has played
Austin
nice
Wells has
since they
has
moved
been
him to
terrific.
Cleveland.
You're 100% right on that. Um, I mean, maybe Glaber, he was on a hitting streak. Um, but those two alone, Judge and Soto, make up a big chunk of the run percentages, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, take those two away, forget it.
All right. So also this week we got the Brewers and the Cardinals. Cardinals still fighting for a playoff spot. The Red Sox and the Astros. Both teams also fighting for playoff positioning. Twins, Padres, and the Mariners and the Dodgers. And I don't think I've seen a team collapse in a way the Seattle Mariners have collapsed in a very long time. They go out last weekend and they beat the snot out of the Mets. And then all of a sudden, Mark, they can't beat the Tigers and the Pirates.
Brutal.
Thank you, O'Neill Cruz, for the fantasy points. So I do appreciate that. Let me tell you something. I'm going to comment directly on the games that Mike just said. The Brewers at the Cardinals. The Brewers still have a lot of pieces that are performing. So don't rule out names: Hoskins, Frelick, Churio, Terang. They'll make up for Yelich. It's hard to make up for the face and the captain, but they're gonna have to do it. So give me the Brewers for that. The Red Sox at the Astros, I'm calling one brawl at least, and then but give it to the Red Sox to beat the Astros. The Twins at the Padres. I don't know what's more exciting is watching the Pirates Paul Skeens or watching San Diego's Jackson Merrill play, because halfway through Paul Skeens got rookie of the year. Now, I'm sorry, the way Merrill's playing, it's going to be closer. I don't think it's a confident majority win right now. You have to give credit where credit is due. So let's go Jackson Merrill. And Mike couldn't have said it better, is that they literally beat the snot out of the Mets, and that was just horrible to watch. But then you can't go out and beat weaker teams. It just shows that you had all this building up and you just came all out and let it all go at the wrong time. So the way the Mariners are playing, I'd say the Dodgers take all three.
All right. Man, should be a fun week. We're coming down the stretch. We got tight races everywhere you look. But that'll do it for this edition of Batter Up here on the Sports Insanity Network. Dan, you want to plug the socials?
At SIN Sports Insane for the Sports Insanity podcast, at S Insanity Real. Yes, I'm plugging my podcast, Mark.
Go for it.
At S Insanity Real for the podcast. That both on X and Sports Insanity Network on Facebook. And the website, the sportsanitynetwork.com, and then YouTube. We're live on it right now. Subscribe to the YouTube. You just hit that button right there. It's right there. Just hit it. And then you'll get more of us on your lovely screens.
The faces of America.
God help us all.
Mark, you got anything about the dugout you want to bring up?
The dugout is going to be taking a little bit of a break as we're coming into the end of baseball season, but we'll have a couple more shows on what comes back from graded, and Charlotte has some fun stuff coming up.
All right, sounds awesome. For Mark, Dan, I'm Mike. Thanks for tuning in to this edition of Batter Up, sponsored by the Dugout of Millwood here on the Sports Insanity Network. We will talk to you all again very soon. Have a great Sunday.
Peace.